The city of Chicago glowed that evening like it had been dressed for the occasion. Streetlights shimmered across the river, and inside the grand ballroom of the Langham Hotel, every detail was perfect. Crystal chandeliers cast golden halos, a live band played smooth jazz, and rows of white roses lined the aisle. For Clarissa Jameson, this was everything she had prayed for, her fairy tale moment finally taking shape in reality. At 27, Clarissa had built a good life for herself. She worked as an event planner, someone used to curating other people's dream days, but tonight the spotlight was hers. Draped in a lace gown that fit like it had been made just for her, she radiated the kind of beauty that wasn't just in the makeup or the dress, but in the way her smile reached her eyes. To her family, friends, and the dozens of guests who filled the ballroom, she looked like a woman who had won at love. Her new husband, Nathaniel Brooks, was equally striking. At 35, he carried himself with the polish of a man who knew success. A well-cut tuxedo emphasized his tall, lean frame, and his easy charm had won over everyone in the room long before the vows were exchanged. He was the kind of man who seemed to have it all: money, connections, a disarming smile. And he had convinced Clarissa he was the man she had been waiting for. When they kissed after the minister's words, applause thundered through the room. Guests dabbed their eyes with napkins, some clapping harder than others as if cheering for the movie-perfect ending they all wished they had. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Clarissa's mother whispered when she hugged her daughter. "You found your prince." Clarissa smiled, her heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and joy. "He's everything I dreamed of, Mama." But beneath that joy was a flicker of nervousness she couldn't quite name. Perhaps it was just the weight of the moment, the vows, the promises, the binding of two lives. Or maybe it was the way Nathaniel's hand had lingered a second too long when they cut the cake, his smile a little stiff, as though holding back something she couldn't see. The reception unfolded in a blur of dancing, laughter, and champagne toasts. Friends made speeches about love conquering all. Nathaniel's best man joked about how patient Nathaniel had been waiting for the right woman, how he always said he would know her when he saw her. Clarissa blushed under the spotlight, her cheeks warm from more than just the wine. For everyone watching, it was flawless. No one could have guessed that beneath the polished surface lay a secret so devastating it would turn this wedding night into a story whispered with horror across Chicago. Later, when the final guests had left and the band packed away their instruments, Clarissa and Nathaniel slipped into the back of a sleek black limousine. The driver pulled away from the hotel, neon lights flashing across the tinted windows. Clarissa leaned against her new husband's shoulder, her veil pushed back, her heart racing with excitement for the night ahead. "This is it," she whispered, her voice soft but trembling. "Our forever starts tonight." Nathaniel smiled faintly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Yes, tonight." His voice carried a weight she didn't recognize then, a subtle tension she mistook for exhaustion. But it wasn't fatigue. It was fear. The limousine rolled toward the hotel suite Nathaniel had reserved, the kind of room meant for opulence and passion. Inside waited champagne on ice, rose petals scattered across silk sheets, a balcony with a view of the glittering Chicago skyline. For Clarissa, it felt like the perfect conclusion to a perfect day. As the elevator doors closed behind them and she clutched his hand, she thought of the little girl she once was, daydreaming of this very night. She had no idea that those dreams were about to shatter. No idea that within hours, the white gown she wore would be stained with blood. The city outside sparkled, but inside that room, darkness was waiting. The hotel suite door clicked shut behind them, sealing away the noise of the city and the echoes of celebration. For Clarissa, it felt like stepping into a dream. The room had been prepared with a precision that matched the grandeur of the wedding itself. Candles flickered in crystal holders, champagne rested in a silver bucket of ice, and rose petals had been scattered so thick across the floor and bed it was as if they were walking on a garden. She laughed softly, the sound nervous but genuine. "It's beautiful, Nathaniel. You really thought of everything." Nathaniel gave a faint smile as he loosened his bow tie. "Only the best for my wife." His tone was steady, but his eyes betrayed something else, something guarded, like a man rehearsing every move, every word. Clarissa, still glowing with joy, crossed the room and ran her fingers over the petals on the bed. She felt the champagne bottle, its chilled surface beating with condensation, and imagined the hours ahead, moments she had been anticipating with equal parts excitement and anxiety. Tonight, the vows would become real. Tonight, she would finally be with him as husband and wife. She turned to him with a playful smile. "So, Mr. Brooks, are you nervous?" Nathaniel chuckled under his breath, though the sound was hollow. "A little. You, of course. Isn't every bride?" she teased, walking closer to him. Her voice dropped, tender and expectant. "But it's the good kind of nervous. The kind that says this is forever." He nodded, his hands fidgeting at his cuffs. Clarissa noticed, but she dismissed it as wedding fatigue. After all, the day had been long. Dances, speeches, endless handshakes and photographs. Any man would be tired. But something about him felt distant, like his mind was already somewhere else. Clarissa leaned in and kissed him, slow and deliberate, trying to draw him into the intimacy she had been yearning for. His lips pressed back against hers, but there was hesitation, an almost imperceptible restraint that sent a chill creeping along her spine. She pulled away slightly, her brow furrowing. "Nathaniel, what's wrong?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "Nothing's wrong. I want this to be perfect." "It already is," she whispered, brushing her fingers along his jaw. But the unease in his eyes unsettled her. They sat on the edge of the bed, champagne glasses in hand. The fizz of the bubbles filled the silence between them, but the atmosphere felt heavier with each passing second. Clarissa tried to fill it with words, about the wedding, about how happy she was, about the life they would build together. Nathaniel smiled and nodded, but his responses grew shorter, his gaze flicking away, as if he couldn't bear the weight of her eyes on him. Finally, Clarissa set her glass down and faced him squarely. "Nathaniel," she said softly, "this is our wedding night. I need you to be here with me, really here. What are you hiding?" He froze. His hand tightened around the stem of the glass until she thought it might break. "I'm not hiding anything," he murmured. Her heart pounded. The doubt she had brushed aside during the reception came flooding back. She touched his arm, urging him. "Then show me. Let's stop talking and just be together." For a moment, it looked as if he might surrender. He leaned in, his hand trailing lightly across her shoulder, his breath uneven. Clarissa closed her eyes, ready for the night to unfold the way she had always imagined. But then he pulled back, abruptly, standing to his feet as though burned. Confusion washed over her. "Nathaniel." He paced to the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline. His back was rigid, his fists clenched at his sides. The silence stretched into something unbearable. Clarissa's voice trembled now. "Why are you acting like this? Do you not want me?" His shoulders sagged. He turned, his face pale, lips pressed into a tight line. "It's not that," he whispered. "God, it's not that." Her chest tightened. She stood, closing the distance, demanding the truth. "Then what is it? Because if you keep shutting me out, I'm going to think this whole marriage is a mistake." Nathaniel flinched at her words, as if struck. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again, but no explanation came. The tension thickened, pressing down on them like a storm about to break. Clarissa's heart hammered with dread she couldn't name. She thought she was about to uncover nerves, doubts, maybe even an old secret fling. But she had no idea the truth waiting to be revealed would shatter her entire world. In that luxurious suite, surrounded by roses and champagne, the dream was already cracking. And Clarissa, still wrapped in lace and hope, was only steps away from the discovery that would turn her perfect night into a nightmare drenched in blood. Clarissa stood frozen in the middle of the suite, her pulse thudding in her ears as Nathaniel's silence grew unbearable. He had been pacing for nearly a minute, his tuxedo jacket now hanging open, his bow tie loose around his neck. The romantic glow of candles only made the tension sharper, as if mocking the promise of this night. She tried again, her voice cracking. "Nathaniel, you owe me the truth. Right now." He turned, his eyes glossy, lips trembling like a man on the verge of confession. For a split second, she thought he might break down and tell her everything. But instead, he whispered, "Clarissa, please. Don't push me. Let's just hold each other tonight." The words struck her like cold steel. Hold each other? That's not what a wedding night is. What are you keeping from me? He moved toward her slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "I love you," he said desperately. "More than I've ever loved anyone." That's all that matters. No, she snapped, stepping back. That's not all that matters. I didn't marry a ghost, Nathaniel. I married a man. My husband. And tonight, I need to know the truth about you. Her voice echoed through the suite. The silence afterward was so heavy it felt like the air had been drained from the room. Nathaniel's face collapsed into anguish. He looked away, his shoulders shaking as if the weight of his secret was finally breaking him down. Clarissa's stomach twisted with dread. She reached for him, her fingers trembling. Please, she begged softly now. Don't let me find out the hard way. Just tell me. He didn't answer. Instead, he let her hand tug at the last layer of clothing between them. And then the world seemed to split in two. Clarissa's breath caught. Her heart stopped. There was nothing. No trace of what she had expected. No sign of the manhood she had trusted was there all along. Her hands flew to her mouth as a scream ripped from her throat. She staggered backward, crashing into the edge of the bed, her eyes wide with horror. Oh my God, she gasped. Oh my God. Nathaniel's face turned ashen. He reached for her, but she shrank away as though his touch might burn her. You lied to me, she shrieked, tears spilling down her face. All this time you lied. Who are you? What are you? Clarissa, please, he choked out, his voice thick with desperation. I didn't lie about loving you. I never lied about that. Don't you dare say that, she shouted. Her chest heaved with rage, betrayal clawing its way through her every nerve. You've been lying since the day we met. You built this whole marriage on a lie. Nathaniel's own tears glistened under the candlelight. I was terrified, he confessed, his voice breaking. I thought if I told you, you'd leave me. I needed to be loved for who I am, not for what I don't have. Clarissa shook her head violently, pacing now, her white dress dragging across rose petals that suddenly felt like ashes. You should have told me before I walked down that aisle. Before I stood in front of God, in front of everyone I know, and promised my life to you. I wanted to, he said, collapsing onto his knees. But every time I tried, I saw your face, and I couldn't risk losing you. Her laughter was bitter, raw. So instead, you tricked me into becoming your wife. You stole my choice. You've destroyed me, Nathaniel. He crawled closer, gripping the hem of her gown. No, Clarissa, I can make you understand. I can make this right. She ripped her dress from his grasp, her eyes blazing. There is no making this right. You've humiliated me. You've broken me. You've turned our wedding night into a nightmare. For a long moment, the room was filled only with the sound of her ragged sobs and his muffled pleas. The champagne fizzed uselessly in its bucket. The skyline glittered beyond the window, indifferent to the storm unraveling in that suite. Clarissa stood rigid, her body trembling, her mind a whirlwind of fury and disbelief. The man she thought was her dream had revealed himself to be something entirely different. Her fairy tale had curdled into betrayal. She could feel herself unraveling under the weight of it, the edges of her sanity fraying with every second. This wasn't just deception. It was a theft of her future, her dignity, her very trust and love. And in the dark corners of her mind, something dangerous began to stir. Because betrayal this deep doesn't just wound. It ignites. Clarissa's scream still echoed in the suite, bouncing off the high ceilings, rattling against the glass of the balcony doors. Her chest heaved, her hands trembling as though she had touched something monstrous. Across from her, Nathaniel was still on his knees, his tuxedo shirt half open, his face streaked with desperation. Clarissa, please. His voice cracked like glass under pressure. Don't look at me like that. I'm still me. I'm still the man you love. The man I love? She spat, her voice shrill with disbelief. You are not the man I love. You tricked me, Nathaniel. You stood there in front of God, in front of my family, and lied to me with every vow that came out of your mouth. He scrambled closer, hands outstretched, his eyes wild. It wasn't a lie. The love is real, Clarissa. The feelings, the promises, all of it, it's real. No, she shouted, shoving him back with all her strength. He stumbled, crashing into the nightstand, sending the lamp tumbling to the floor. The bulb burst with a sharp pop, leaving the room darker, more menacing. Clarissa pressed herself against the wall, her white dress spread around her like a fallen angel. Tears blurred her vision, but rage sharpened her words. You robbed me of the truth. You stole my choice. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? Nathaniel rose unsteadily, his breathing heavy, his hands trembling as if even he no longer believed his own defense. I just wanted you to see me for who I am, not for what I don't have. I thought you could love me beyond this. Her laughter came out broken, almost hysterical. Beyond this. You think love is built on deception? You think I could ever forgive you for this? He flinched, the rejection slicing deeper than any blade. In a sudden burst of anguish, he grabbed the champagne bottle and hurled it against the wall. It exploded, shards of glass scattering across the carpet, champagne spraying like blood. Clarissa screamed, clutching her chest, her heart pounding like a war drum. You're insane. I'm desperate, he bellowed, his face contorted in rage and grief. Do you understand? I gave you everything. My name, my future, my soul. And you, his voice broke as he pounded his fist against his chest. You were supposed to be the one who stayed. Her hands balled into fists, fury blazing in her eyes. I didn't marry a ghost, Nathaniel. I didn't marry a lie. You've trapped me in a nightmare, and I can't breathe. The air between them grew suffocating, thick with betrayal and grief. Clarissa pushed past him, stumbling toward the door. I'm leaving. In a flash, Nathaniel blocked her path, his arms spread wide, his face pale but determined. No, not like this. You can't walk out of here hating me. I won't let you. Her voice dropped, low and venomous. Move. Clarissa, move, she screamed, shoving him again. This time he shoved back, harder than he intended. Clarissa slammed into the edge of the dresser, the impact knocking the breath from her lungs. Pain shot through her side. She gasped, staring at him with a mix of shock and fury. You put your hands on me. Her voice was icy, trembling with wrath. Nathaniel's eyes widened as regret flickered across his face. I didn't mean. But she wasn't listening. The fear, the betrayal, the humiliation, they ignited into something uncontrollable. She lunged at him, shoving, striking, her hands clawing at the man who had ruined her life in one night. The suite descended into chaos. The sound of furniture crashing, fabric tearing, glass shattering filled the air. Their screams overlapped, his begging, her rage. Clarissa, stop. Don't you dare tell me to stop, she howled, her voice breaking. You've destroyed me. In that storm of violence, the line between victim and aggressor blurred. Nathaniel's strength faltered under her fury, and Clarissa, blinded by betrayal, didn't see where her anger was leading. Because anger, once unleashed, doesn't just lash out, it consumes. And in that suite, with roses crushed beneath their feet and blood already dripping from broken glass, the path forward was no longer about love, or forgiveness, or even survival. It was about destruction. The suite had turned into a battlefield. Rose petals that once promised romance were now crushed into the carpet, tangled with shards of glass and streaks of spilled champagne. Clarissa's gown, pure white just hours ago, was torn at the hem and streaked with stains from their struggle. Her breaths came sharp, ragged, each one driven by the fury tearing through her chest. Nathaniel stumbled backward, his hand bleeding from where glass had cut him, crimson drops spattering the floor. He held it out toward her as if to beg, his voice hoarse with desperation. Clarissa, please. I'm not your enemy. I love you. She shook her head, eyes blazing with tears. Love? You dare call this love? You humiliated me, Nathaniel. You deceived me. You stood at that altar and lied to my face. He tried to reach for her again, but she swiped his arm away, her nails scratching his skin. Don't touch me, she screamed, her voice echoing through the suite like a cry for war. The heat of the moment burned everything rational away. He lunged forward to hold her, to stop her from bolting through the door. She twisted violently, her elbow striking his jaw with a sharp crack. He reeled back, clutching his face, his eyes wide not with anger, but with shock at how far they had fallen in just one night. You don't understand, he begged, his words tumbling out in a frantic rush. All I ever wanted was for you to see me as more than what I lack. I thought if I could just have this night with you, everything else would fall into place. Clarissa's chest rose and fell like a storm, her voice breaking under the weight of betrayal. You stole from me. My choice. My future. My faith in everything I believed about us. You stole it all. Her hand found a shard of broken glass on the nightstand, the jagged edge gleaming in the candlelight. She held it up with trembling fingers, her knuckles white, her entire body shaking. "Stay away from me." Nathaniel froze, his eyes fixed on the shard. For a moment, neither of them breathed. The candles flickered against the walls, shadows looming larger, as though the entire room was holding its breath. "Clarissa," he whispered, raising his hands slowly in surrender. "You don't want to do this." Her tears blurred her vision, but the rage was clear. "You already did this. You pushed me to this." He stepped closer, ignoring the blood dripping from his hand, ignoring the danger. "Put it down. Please. I can't lose you. Not like this." Her body trembled, her arms shaking under the weight of both fear and fury. But when he moved closer, something in her snapped. "Don't," she cried, slashing the shard through the air. A scream tore from Nathaniel's throat as the jagged glass cut across his chest. He staggered backward, his tuxedo ripping, crimson spreading fast across the once immaculate white shirt. His hand clutched the wound, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Clarissa," he gasped, collapsing against the edge of the bed. She dropped the shard, her chest heaving as the reality of what she had done crashed over her like a tidal wave. "Oh God! Oh my God!" He slid onto the silk sheets, his blood soaking into the petals, turning them dark and heavy. Clarissa rushed to his side, pressing her hands against the wound, her tears falling onto his face. "I didn't mean to. I didn't want this. Please, stay with me. Please." His breaths came shallow, his eyes glazing. Still, he reached up with his trembling hand, brushing her cheek. "I loved you, even if it was never enough." Then his hand fell limp. The room went deathly silent. Only the faint hiss of champagne fizzing in the bucket and the muffled hum of the city beyond the glass broke the stillness. Clarissa sat frozen, her gown drenched in his blood, her body trembling with shock. She looked around at the wreckage, the shattered glass, the overturned furniture, the roses crushed beyond recognition. The suite that was meant to be the birthplace of forever had become a crime scene. And in that moment, Clarissa knew nothing could ever undo what had happened here. The bride who had walked into this room, filled with love and dreams, was gone. In her place sat a woman broken by betrayal, drenched in blood, staring at the lifeless body of the man she thought was her future. Outside, Chicago glittered indifferently, unaware that in one hotel suite, a wedding had ended in tragedy. For a long time, Clarissa could not move. She sat there, drenched in Nathaniel's blood, her hands still pressed against his chest, though she knew the fight was over. The rhythmic rise and fall of his breath, gone. The man who had walked her down the aisle hours earlier now lay lifeless across silk sheets and crushed rose petals. Her mind spun in circles, refusing to accept what her eyes could see. "No, this isn't real. This isn't happening. Weddings don't end like this." The room reeked of copper and champagne. The sweet scent of roses had soured, mingling with the acrid smell of spilled liquor and sweat. Clarissa's sobs came in gasps, her body rocking as though she could rock herself back into the life she'd had before she opened that hotel door. "I didn't mean to," she whispered to the stillness. Her voice cracked, desperate, pleading with the silence itself. "I didn't mean to." The candles flickered low, shadows twitching across the walls, making the suite look like some grotesque theater set. Everything that had been beautiful was twisted, glasses shattered, petals blackened with blood, a love story turned into a nightmare. Then came the sound that broke through her haze, the muffled knock of a neighbor's fist against the wall. A voice followed, distant but sharp. "Is everything okay in there?" Clarissa froze. She couldn't answer. Her throat locked, her chest heavy. Another knock, louder this time. Then silence, followed by hurried footsteps fading down the hall. A pit opened in her stomach. Someone had heard. Someone was calling. Minutes later, the pounding came, hard, relentless, against the suite's door. "Chicago PD, open up." Clarissa's body jolted. Her bloodied hands shook as she stumbled to her feet. She stared at the door as if it were a guillotine. Her dress dragged across the carpet, streaked crimson. "Chicago police. We're coming in." The crash of the door being rammed open echoed like thunder. Officers flooded into the suite, guns raised, voices booming. "Hands where we can see them. Now." Clarissa lifted her trembling hands, still slick with Nathaniel's blood. The sight made one officer curse under his breath. Another barked, "On your knees." She collapsed before they even reached her sobs breaking into hysterical cries. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to kill him. The officers moved swiftly, securing her wrists with cold steel cuffs, reading her rights in clipped tones. But Clarissa barely heard them. Her eyes were locked on the bed, on the body half hidden beneath crimson silk and shattered petals. The white shirt torn open, the stillness that mocked her every heartbeat. Clear the scene, one officer shouted. Another checked Nathaniel's pulse, shaking his head grimly. Male victim, no signs of life, the officer reported. Room's a mess. Possible domestic gone violent. The radio crackled. More voices. The shuffle of boots. Cameras flashing as crime scene technicians arrived. The suite filled with movement, the sterile, mechanical kind that follows death. Clarissa knelt on the floor, handcuffed, her veil slipping from her hair, her gown torn and stained. She looked less like a bride and more like a ghost pulled from a nightmare. One detective crouched in front of her, his tone softer than the others. Ma'am, tell me what happened here tonight. Her lips trembled, her eyes wild. He lied to me. He wasn't who he said he was. I just wanted the truth. I didn't mean to. Her words collapsed into sobs, incoherent, swallowed by grief. The detective exchanged a look with his partner, the kind of look seasoned cops share when the scene already speaks louder than the suspect's words. Blood on the walls. Glass scattered like landmines. A love story gone nuclear in less than a day. As they lifted Clarissa to her feet, guiding her toward the hallway, flashes from cameras lit up the night. News had traveled fast. Reporters were already gathered outside the hotel, microphones raised like spears. Clarissa shielded her face with her cuffed hands, her tears streaking across her blood-stained cheeks. The crowd gasped, whispered, shouted questions. Bride arrested on her wedding night, someone yelled. Did you kill your husband, ma'am? Another voice cut through the chaos. Clarissa stumbled as officers ushered her into the back of a squad car. The door slammed, sealing her inside the cage of steel and silence. She pressed her forehead against the glass, her eyes locked on the glowing windows of the suite above. The place where she had walked in with hope and walked out in chains. And as the car pulled away, sirens cutting through the Chicago night, one thought consumed her. The wedding was over. The fairy tale was over. Forever was over. The fluorescent lights of the Chicago Police Department's interrogation room hummed faintly, a constant, grating reminder that Clarissa was far from the ballroom where she had once stood radiant in lace. Hours had passed since the suite erupted in chaos. But for her, time had collapsed into a blur of sirens, questions, and cold stares. Now she sat at a metal table, hands still cuffed, her wedding gown stiff with dried blood. The satin clung to her skin like a curse. Her veil had been taken, her hair matted from tears and sweat. She looked less like a bride and more like a cautionary tale, her face pale, her eyes hollow, her lips trembling with every shallow breath. The door creaked open, and two detectives stepped inside. Detective Harris, a grizzled veteran with silver stubble, dropped a file on the table with a heavy thud. His partner, Detective Alvarez, younger but sharper in his tone, pulled up a chair across from her. Mrs. Brooks, Harris began, his voice low, deliberate. You know why you're here. Clarissa flinched at the name. Mrs. Brooks. It felt like an insult now, a title tied to a man who lay lifeless on silk sheets. I didn't mean to, she whispered, her voice cracking. I swear, I didn't mean to. Alvarez leaned in, his eyes piercing. Then help us understand. What happened in that hotel room tonight? Clarissa's gaze flicked to the one-way glass, knowing others were watching. She clasped her trembling hands together, blood still dried in the lines of her skin. He lied to me. From the very beginning. Everything was a lie. About what? Harris pressed. Her breath hitched. She shook her head, shame and fury battling inside her. About who he was. About being a man. I thought I knew him. I thought I married the man of my dreams. But when I found out, she choked on the words, her chest tightening. When I found out he had deceived me, everything inside me broke. The detectives exchanged a glance. Alvarez's pen scratched across his notepad. So you attacked him? No, she cried, tears spilling. I defended myself. I was terrified. He pushed me. He blocked me from leaving. I didn't plan to hurt him. It just happened. Harris's tone was steady, almost fatherly. Clarissa, you stabbed him. Multiple witnesses heard the screaming. Neighbors called about glass breaking. When officers arrived, you were covered in his blood. You've got to see it from our side. It doesn't look like self-defense. It looks like rage. Her voice grew desperate. It was rage, but not the kind you think. I wasn't trying to kill him. I was trying to protect myself from the betrayal, from the lies choking me. He wouldn't let me go. I snapped. I didn't even realize what I had in my hand until it was too late. The room fell into silence. Only the hum of the lights and the scratch of Alvarez's pen filled the void. "Clarissa," Alvarez said finally, his tone less sharp now. "You've got one chance to be straight with us. Did you want him dead?" Her head shook violently. "No. God, no. I loved him. At least, I loved the man I thought he was. But that man never existed. And when I realized it, I lost control." Harris studied her with tired eyes. He had seen liars, manipulators, killers who spun stories to dodge the truth. But in Clarissa's raw, broken words, he heard something else: genuine devastation. Still, devastation didn't change the fact that a man was dead. He closed the file. "We'll leave it here for now." He stood, Alvarez following, the heavy door clicking shut behind them. Alone again, Clarissa slumped forward, her cuffed hands resting on the cold steel table. Her tears pooled beneath her cheek. The memories replayed like a reel she couldn't turn off: Nathaniel's pleas, her screams, the shard of glass in her trembling hand. Outside the room, reporters shouted into cameras, news anchors broke into programming. Headlines scrolled across the bottom of screens in living rooms across Chicago. "Bride arrested on wedding night for husband's death." The city buzzed with judgment, half of it condemning her as a murderer, the other half whispering about secrets too shocking for polite conversation. Inside the interrogation room, Clarissa closed her eyes, praying for silence, praying for a world where the night had ended differently. But all she had was the cold hum of the lights and the weight of forever pressing down on her. The Cook County Courthouse loomed gray and solemn against the winter sky, its stone steps crowded with reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers. Weeks had passed since that bloody wedding night, but the city of Chicago had not stopped talking. Every newspaper carried the story. Every talk show speculated about motives. The nation debated whether Clarissa Jameson Brooks was a cold-blooded killer or a woman pushed past the breaking point. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Family members filled the benches, strangers elbowed each other for a seat, and cameras outside broadcasted live updates. The hum of whispers hushed as the bailiff announced the judge's arrival. "All rise." Judge Harold Benton, a stern man with decades of trials behind him, took his seat at the bench. His gavel struck once, echoing through the chamber. "Court is now in session." Clarissa was led in, dressed not in a wedding gown, but in a simple gray suit borrowed from her defense team. The handcuffs had been removed, but the weight of chains still seemed to hang from her shoulders. Her eyes were downcast, her face pale, every movement heavy with exhaustion. Across the room, the prosecution prepared its case. Assistant District Attorney Karen Stokes adjusted her papers, her voice sharp as she addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about betrayal, yes, but it is also about choice. Clarissa Brooks made the choice to kill her husband. She didn't walk away. She didn't call for help. She chose violence. And tonight, a man is dead because of it." The words cut like a knife. Clarissa clenched her hands beneath the table, fighting back tears. Her attorney, Paul Harrington, rose slowly, his expression grave but determined. "The prosecution wants you to believe this was murder," he said, his voice steady. "But murder requires intent. Clarissa did not walk into that hotel room planning to kill. She walked in as a bride, a woman full of hope, only to be met with a devastating deception. She was pushed into a state of shock and rage most of us cannot even imagine. What happened that night was not premeditated. It was a tragic accident born of betrayal." The jury shifted uneasily. Some faces softened, others remained stone. The line between justice and vengeance had never looked so blurred. Witnesses were called. Hotel staff described the sounds of screaming, of glass breaking, of a woman's voice crying out in fury. A forensic expert detailed the wound, the shard of glass that cut deep across Nathaniel's chest, the blood that soaked into the silk sheets. Photographs were shown, images so raw that several jurors turned away, their hands covering their mouths. Then came the moment everyone waited for. Clarissa herself took the stand. Her attorney guided her gently through her testimony. She spoke softly, her voice breaking as she described the wedding, the joy, the anticipation, the crushing revelation in that hotel suite. I felt like my entire life had been ripped away in one instant, she confessed, tears rolling down her cheeks. The man I thought I married didn't exist. I was cornered, humiliated, terrified. I never wanted to kill him. I just wanted him to let me go. Her words hung in the courtroom like smoke, thick and suffocating. Some jurors blinked back tears. Others stared at her with suspicion, their arms crossed. The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. Mrs. Brooks, isn't it true that you had the shard of glass in your hand? Isn't it true you swung it at your husband? Clarissa's voice cracked. Yes, but And isn't it true, the prosecutor pressed, her voice rising, that you struck him hard enough to pierce his chest and end his life? That, Mrs. Brooks, is not an accident. That is intent. Clarissa's tears blurred her vision. Her hands gripped the edge of the witness box. I lost control, she whispered. I was drowning in lies. I didn't think. I just reacted. Silence followed. The weight of her words pressed down on every soul in the room. The judge finally broke it, his gavel rapping once. We will adjourn until tomorrow morning. As the jury filed out, Clarissa was led away. Her mother wept quietly in the gallery. Outside, reporters shouted into microphones. The Chicago bride, murderer or victim? The city remained divided. Half believed she had been driven by betrayal into a tragic mistake. The other half saw only a woman who had taken a life on the very night she vowed to love and honor. And in the quiet of her holding cell, Clarissa pressed her palms to her face, whispering the same words again and again like a prayer. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. The final day of the trial arrived with a tension so thick it seemed to vibrate in the air. Snow drifted gently outside the courthouse windows, but inside, the atmosphere was heavy, suffocating. The jury had deliberated for 2 long days, and the city of Chicago held its breath for the outcome. Clarissa sat at the defense table, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She had hardly slept since she last took the stand. Each night in her cell, she replayed Nathaniel's final words, the way his hand had reached for her cheek, the way his blood had spilled across the sheets. She had prayed for mercy, for understanding. Now, all she could do was wait. Judge Benton entered the courtroom, his gavel echoing like thunder. This court will come to order. The jury filed in, their faces pale, their expressions unreadable. Clarissa searched them desperately for some sign, compassion, anger, pity, but their eyes gave her nothing. Madam Foreperson, the judge said, has the jury reached a verdict? A middle-aged woman in a navy blazer stood, clutching the slip of paper in her hand. Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly. We have, Your Honor. The paper was passed to the bailiff, then to the judge, who scanned it with the solemnity of a man who had read too many such verdicts. Finally, he returned it to the foreperson. Please read the verdict. The silence was deafening. Clarissa's breath caught in her throat. On the charge of second-degree murder, the foreperson said, we, the jury, find the defendant, Clarissa Jameson Brooks, guilty. The words struck Clarissa like a physical blow. Her body slumped, her face collapsing into her hands. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Some spectators nodded grimly, others whispered in shock. Her mother let out a strangled cry from the gallery, while Nathaniel's relatives clutched one another, tears streaming down their faces. The judge's voice cut through the murmurs. Order. Order in the court. His gavel slammed again. Clarissa's attorney placed a steady hand on her shoulder, whispering, it could have been worse. First degree would have meant life. We'll appeal. But the words barely registered. To Clarissa, guilty was the only sound echoing in her mind, pounding like a drum. The judge turned to sentencing. His voice was firm, unyielding. Mrs. Brooks, the court has weighed the evidence, the testimony, and the circumstances. While the jury believes your actions were not premeditated, the fact remains that a man lost his life at your hand. This court hereby sentences you to 20 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, with eligibility for parole after 12. Clarissa gasped, her tears flowing freely now. 20 years. The number wrapped around her like chains. She could almost see the decades stretching ahead of her, birthdays missed, dreams wasted, youth slipping away inside prison walls. As deputies moved to escort her out, she turned one last time to the gallery. Her mother's tear-streaked face met hers, lips whispering, "I love you." Clarissa mouthed the words back, her voice too broken to speak. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps as she was led away in cuffs. Microphones thrust forward, cameras flashing like lightning. Headlines were already forming. Bride sentenced, from wedding gown to prison blues. Justice for Nathaniel or miscarriage of mercy? The city remained split. Some praised the verdict as justice. Others argued she had been pushed beyond reason by betrayal no one could understand. Talk shows debated late into the night, callers flooding phone lines with opinions. Monster or victim? Inside the transport van, Clarissa pressed her forehead to the cold steel wall. Her body shook with sobs, her gown long since replaced by gray prison attire. She whispered to herself the only truth she knew, the only thing she clung to as the van carried her away from the life she once imagined. I didn't mean to kill him. I just wanted the truth. But the world would never see it that way. To them, she would forever be the Chicago bride who turned her wedding night into blood. The clang of prison gates closing behind her was unlike anything Clarissa had ever heard. It wasn't just metal on metal, it was finality. A sound that told her the life she once knew was gone, locked on the other side of the bars. Her gray uniform hung loosely on her frame, a cruel echo of the wedding gown she had worn only months earlier. The walls were bare, cold, indifferent. Time here didn't move like it had on the outside. Days didn't start with sunlight or laughter, but with the shrill clang of bells and the shouts of guards. Clarissa kept her head down, blending into the rhythm of prison life. The line for meals, the shuffle to the yard, the hollow quiet of nights spent staring at a cracked ceiling. Other inmates whispered about her. Some pitied her, others mocked her. The bride who killed her husband on her wedding night. The label clung to her like a second skin she could never shed. But the hardest part wasn't the whispers or the walls. It was the silence inside her cell. Silence that forced her to replay every moment of that night over and over. Nathaniel's voice begging, her screams, the flash of glass in her hand, the blood that refused to stop flowing. She pressed her palms to her face, whispering the same words like a prayer, the words she'd said from the moment the police stormed the hotel suite. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. But prayers couldn't rewrite the past. Letters arrived from the outside. Her mother wrote every week, lines filled with love and heartbreak. I believe you, baby. I know you never meant for this. Stay strong. Friends from her old life wrote less often, their words heavy with curiosity rather than comfort. Strangers wrote too, some sending sympathy, others sending hatred. Murderer. Liar. You deserve worse. Clarissa read them all, each one cutting in its own way. But none wounded her more than the silence from Nathaniel's family. No letter. No word. Just absence. As the months turned into years, she learned to survive. She worked in the laundry, folded uniforms, kept to herself. But the memories never loosened their grip. Some nights, she would wake gasping, drenched in sweat, seeing his hand reaching for her cheek, hearing his last words echo in the dark. I loved you, even if it was never enough. Those words haunted her more than any sentence the judge had passed, because deep down, she knew he hadn't lied about that. For all the secrets he had kept, Nathaniel had loved her. And despite everything, despite the rage, the betrayal, the blood, some part of her had loved him too. She often wondered what might have been different if he had told her the truth before the vows. If he had trusted her enough to lay bare the secret that destroyed them both. Would she have walked away? Would she have chosen honesty over illusion? Or would she have stayed, found a way to love him as he was? The questions gnawed at her, unanswerable and eternal. Chicago moved on, though it never forgot. True crime shows aired episodes about her case. Narrators whispering about the Chicago bride who turned her honeymoon suite into a crime scene. Law students debated her trial in classrooms. Journalists revisited the story every anniversary. She had become a cautionary tale, her name forever tied to that night. Clarissa, now older, sat by the narrow window of her cell, watching the snow fall over the yard. 12 years had passed. Parole hearings loomed. Some whispered she might walk free soon. Others swore she would never leave those walls. She didn't know what waited for her on the outside, if she'd be shunned, pitted, or forgotten. She didn't know if she had the strength to face a world that remembered her only for her worst moment. But she did know one thing. She would never again be the woman who walked down that aisle in lace and roses. That version of Clarissa had died in the hotel suite, alongside Nathaniel, in a storm of betrayal and blood. And so, she whispered one last prayer to herself, not for forgiveness, not for freedom, but for peace. Let me carry this weight. Let me carry it until the end. But let me never forget that I once loved, even if it destroyed me. The clang of gates echoed again down the halls, announcing another day inside. Clarissa closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks, and sat in the silence that had become her companion. The world would remember her as the Chicago bride who ended her wedding night in blood. But in the quiet of her cell, she was simply a woman haunted by love, lies, and the truth that came too late.